I'm Indy Neidell, and this is a World War II super special. Yep, it's something we've never done before. It's an in-depth and long map special, and it's on the Battle of Stalingrad. In the regular weekly series, I covered Stalingrad week by week as it happened. Today, we look back at it through the maps we created, visualizing and narrating the whole story in one go, and I'm pretty sure you are going to like this. We made this masterpiece in collaboration with Call of War. It's a player versus player online strategy game and emulates the kind of decision making that takes place during a war. You choose a country to lead and can fight up to 100 other players in real time. That's a pretty cool aspect because some games can take weeks to complete, which really gives you a sense of the long-term strategic decisions that Stavka or OKW had to make for a massive battle like Stalingrad. On top of that, you can also use tanks, planes, and submarines. You can build up an army for when you declare war on your neighbors or protect them with alliances. You can choose your own strategy and engage in epic battles. So check it out. You can play with the same account on PC or mobile. Click on the link in the description to get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free, and that's only available for 30 days, so be quick. Right. As regular viewers will know, the conquest of the Soviet oil fields in the Caucasus was one of the objectives of the German summer 1942 offensive in the Soviet Union. That offensive is Fall Blau, and it kicks off in late June, but that is not for today. I'm just setting the story, right? Just setting the scene. We begin the week ending August 14th, when the quest for oil is proving fruitless. The Axis enter Maykop and Krasnodar both on August 9th, only to find that the Soviets have thoroughly wrecked all of the oil installations. Army Group A is now extended over a huge area with supplies low and Soviet resistance increasing. Their strength is waning and they have achieved none of their strategic objectives. Further to the northeast on the 9th, Stalingrad front is subordinated to the southeastern front, so Vasily Gordov becomes Andrei Yeremenko's deputy. The Axis are advancing to the city's external defense line. This is line O. Behind it are lines K and S, and then line G is within the actual city. Soviet Chief of Staff Alexander Vasilevsky and Yeremenko meet up the 12th. Yeremenko thinks that since the enemy is getting rid of the Soviet bridgeheads on the west bank of the Don and west of Kalach and has closed the Kalach pocket, he will soon launch a major attack against the Soviet 4th Tank Army to try and force a crossing of the Don itself. That Kalach pocket contains chunks of Anton Lopatin's 62nd Army, and German 6th Army Commander Friedrich Paulus claims over 35,000 prisoners and 270 tanks destroyed. However, as many as half of Lopatin's soldiers escaped east over the Don to fight another day, and eliminating the pocket will be yet another drain on 6th Army's time and resources. Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army was stopped at the end of last week, Vasily Chuikov's operational group holding back his left wing. So Hoth splits his forces, the main bulk around Abganerovo fighting 64th Army, and a smaller one against Chuikov. All this week, the Romanian 6th Corps and units of German 4th Army Corps assault Chuikov's positions, not making much headway until the 13th, when 64th Army orders them to slowly withdraw to avoid being surrounded. As for Mikhail Shumilov's 64th Army and its patchwork of forces, they launch a counterattack the 9th, featuring over 100 tanks backed by nearly 400 big guns and mortars against the spearheads of the 48th Panzer Corps, which is a decent advantage in big guns over those 3 German divisions, equal armor, and more manpower. For 2 days, they fight along the Tikhorets-Stalingrad railway line. The Red Army General Staff Daily Report for the 11th says that 64th Army has done its job, throwing the enemy back from its forward positions. So now the front stabilizes here, and Hoth cannot reach Stalingrad without reinforcements. His 4th Panzers have failed to take the outskirts of Stalingrad, much like 6th Army has failed to surround and destroy the Soviets west of the Don. 6th Army is attacking to try to clear out the northeast corner of the Don River bend. Paulus launches his main attack 6:30 a.m. on the 15th, beginning with a 2-hour artillery barrage. Dive bombers support the Panzer spearheads as they drive right down the middle of Vasily Kryuchenkin's tank army and head east. As for 4th Panzer Army, their attacks to the north of Abganerovo Station the 20th fail, but by the end of the week, 48th Panzer Corps has driven a wedge 20 kilometers deep and 15 wide between 64th and 57th Armies. If 64th Army cannot close that, they might be surrounded from the east. 6th Army now begins its drive for the suburbs of Stalingrad. The night of the 22nd, most of 16th Panzer Division moves to its jumping off point east of the River Don. This is a bridgehead like 5 kilometers wide and maybe 2 deep. Soviet artillery and bombers try to knock the bridge out to no avail, and at 4:15 a.m. the panzers blast off, an armored punch aiming right across the bare steppes for the Volga. Stalingrad or bust, with heavy Luftwaffe support, including a devastating aerial bombardment of the city itself by 8th Air Corps. At 11:10 p.m., August 23rd, the 79th Panzer Grenadier Regiment radios from the Volga that they were located in Spartanovka, the northerly suburb of Stalingrad. The German advance has split the front in two. They've cut the railway lines from the city to the north and the northwest. Most communications between Moscow and the Caucasus are cut. They've reached the river, and the bombing of the city has impaired all industrial and military activity. Vasilevsky phones Stalin and asks about the possibility of evacuating civilians and industry from the city. Stalin says that would be a decision to surrender the city and forbids any such preparations for evacuation or even industrial sabotage. With these orders, the die is cast for the battle for Stalingrad. The mobile units of 6th Army are unable, however, to break into the city yet. Yeremenko is counterattacking the corridor between the Don and Volga all this time, trying to cut off all the advanced troops from 14th Panzer Corps. On the 26th, 4th Tank Army's left and 62nd Army's right, attacking as a pincer, managed to squeeze the corridor down to 4 kilometers, but they cannot close off and isolate the German mobile divisions who are supplied by air. Anton Lopatin's 62nd Army defends the north, northwest, and western approaches to the city. But with the Germans at the Volga to the north and pushing past Sokharevka, some of its units are threatened themselves with encirclement. By the end of the week, 62nd's left wing has been driven into 64th Army's rear. So on the 29th, Yeremenko will transfer control of 62nd to the southeastern front. By now, Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzers, attacking from the southwest, have advanced to southeastern front's intermediate defense line, but from the 26th they have stopped to regroup in the face of ever-stiffening Soviet defense. He's located a weak spot in the Soviet defenses, some 20 kilometers long, running west from Abganarovo Station. This is defended by the 126 rifles from 64th Army, but they are missing nearly all of their artillery. Hoth sends in the 24th and 14th Panzer Divisions, with the Romanian infantry on the left flank, and they have a huge superiority in men, armor, and artillery. They break through that day, advancing 20 kilometers or so and taking Zeti. This sabotages 64th Army's entire defense along the railway line and threatens the rear of both 64th and 62nd Armies, so they have to withdraw. But Mikhail Shumilov still has some of the 64th defending the bulge towards the River Don from Basargino Station, and some of the 62nd is defending north of the Kalach-Stalingrad railway line, and they are in serious jeopardy. However, on September 1st, the panzers do not continue north to link up with 6th Army and surround the enemy, but swing east and try to drive on Stalingrad straight from the west. This fails though, with the result that the Corps and Army commanders Kempf and Hoth were disconcerted with the large gap that had formed between 14th and 24th Panzer Divisions, the inability of the former to defeat and destroy the enemy to its front, and 24th Panzer Division's failure to link up with 6th Army forces to the north. The next day, Paulus moves some forces south to remedy the situation. His 71st Infantry links up with the Romanian 20th Infantry Division from the 4th Panzers near the railway station at Voroponovo, and the attackers become a solid front. The battle for the suburbs of Stalingrad now begins in earnest. Paulus and Hoth both launch their attacks the morning of the 3rd to break the city's defenses, even as Soviet commander Georgy Zhukov's Stalingrad front armies come from the north to try to break the Axis corridor from the Don to the Volga and link up with 62nd Army. On the 5th, the Soviets renew their counterattacks against the corridor, now with 4 armies. The fighting that day and all the rest of the week, is bloody and brutal, and extremely costly for the Soviets in men. But the bitter truth was that Zhukov's entire offensive had stalled. This offensive, though, did force Paulus to halt the 51st Army Corps drive on the city and send its air support to the north. and the 14th Panzer Corps as well must block partial Soviet penetrations in the corridor all week long. On the 6th, 14th Panzer Corps Commander Gustav von Wittersheim tells Paulus he needs more support to hold the northern flank, but Paulus insists taking the city is the only priority, even as 14th Panzer Corps are being kept too busy to help in taking the northern factory districts. Despite the diversion of the attacks on the corridor, though, the Axis makes some gains on the 6th from Orlovka around to Gumrak, but not much more. On the 7th, 51st Army Corps resumes its drive, and they do gain ground, but because of the attacks on the corridor, and because Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army's attacks from the south are stopped for a few days by the flanking threat of the dug-in 64th Army, Paulus orders the 51st to turn to the northeast on the 9th, help Wittersheim, and take the Soviets' Orlovka salient. And on the 10th, the 29th Motorized Division finally breaks through to the Volga on the southern side of the city at Kuprosnoye, and that day, the Soviet 62nd Army is hit all along its line from north to south, with its units in the center defending just 2 kilometers from the heart of the city. The suburbs are slowly falling. A wedge has been driven between the 62nd and 64th armies. The Orlovka salient is shrinking. Paulus and Hoth are making adjustments for their final assault on the city of Stalingrad. By nightfall on September 11th, Stalingrad's defenses have shrunk to the core of the city, a bridgehead in the south, and the northern factory district. Now holding the high ground west and southwest of the city, the assault companies of the Wehrmacht prepare for the final storm. But before the signal to attack is given, 3 major conferences take place that will decide the fate of Stalingrad and those fighting for it. In the afternoon of September 12th, Paulus flies in to meet with Hitler, Maximilian von Weichs, commander of Army Group B, and Franz Halder, Army Chief of Staff, at Vinnytsia in Ukraine. After the daily situation report, Hitler turns to the pressing matter at hand, the attack on Stalingrad. Halder confidently estimates they need around 10 days to seize the city and 14 additional days to secure it and regroup. Hitler decides to shift the rest of 48th Panzer Corps from 4th Panzer Army to Paulus's 6th Army and orders the attack on the city to begin in the early morning hours the next day, September 13th. At the same time those plans are being finalized, Zhukov arrives at Joseph Stalin's headquarters in the Kremlin. The attempts to pierce the German 14th Panzer Corps with a combined assault by 1st Guards Army, 24th Army, and 66th Army have failed. By now, the front is just 6 kilometers away from the northern factory district, and no more than 2 kilometers west of Stalingrad's city center. Zhukov, though, is convinced that if they tie the Germans down in fighting for the city, then they can mount a large-scale counteroffensive and liquidate the Axis corridor between the Volga and Don rivers. Soviet reconnaissance has indicated that the overextended German flanks might be vulnerable to a series of strategic assaults, and probing attacks have found weak points in the sectors controlled by the Wehrmacht's allies. However, Zhukov thinks they won't be able to gather the force for such a move until November. Until then, Stalingrad must hold. They will funnel just enough troops, ammunition, and supplies over the Volga to keep 62nd and 64th armies alive and fighting. Also on the night of the 12th in Stalingrad itself, Commissar Nikita Khrushchev is searching for a new commander for 62nd Army to replace Anton Lopatin. Khrushchev consults with the commanders around him, and the spotlight soon falls on Vasily Chuikov, deputy commander of 64th Army. When Khrushchev asks Chuikov his opinion on how to defend the city, Chuikov answers, "There is little wiggle room for interpretation of Stalin's orders. Stalingrad is not to be given up, period." Satisfied by the answer, the council announces Chuikov as new commander of the 62nd Army, and basically the defense of Stalingrad itself. At once, Chuikov moves to his new headquarters at the Mamayev Kurgan, an ancient Tartar burial mound. On paper, 62nd Army has 12 divisions and 7 separate brigades. However, only the NKVD divisions and a few of the recently arrived rifle units from Stavka Reserve are close to full strength. Most divisions are short on automatic weapons and divisional guns. The 115th, 124th, and 149th Rifle Brigades are stationed in the northern part of Stalingrad, concentrated on a defensive sector between the Tractor, Red October, and Barakati factories. West of the city sits the 42nd Rifle Brigade, flanked by the 23rd Tank Corps and 6th Tank Brigade. The weakest sector of the defense is in the south. held by what's left of the 35th Guards and the 131st Rifle Division. The forces of the NKVD divisions are spread out equally, occupying the obvious approaches to the city. As dawn breaks on the 13th, Chuikov watches the German advance on the Mamayev Kurgan begin through his periscope. 51st Corps attacks along the ancient Tartar wall. Massive artillery and air bombardments continue throughout the day, pummeling the already devastated city. The gunners of 6th Army expend 760 tons of ammunition today alone. On the 14th, German assault troops take Mamayev Kurgan. Alexander Rodimtsev begins bringing in the 13th Guards Division from across the river, under heavy fire the whole time, taking 30% casualties on just the 14th, trying to push the Germans back from Mamayev Kurgan. On the 14th, the central railway station changes hands 4 times between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. alone. More 13th Guards units come over the night of the 15th to help in the fight for the station. By the time they clear it of the enemy the 16th, it has changed hands 15 times. Also that day, 2 Soviet regiments storm Mamayev Kurgan from the north and northeast, clearing the Germans and their machine guns from the summit and holding on against repeated German attacks over the following days. The German 71st and 295th Divisions fight their way into the city center, the 94th into Minin and towards the junction of Soviet 62nd and 64th Armies. The morning of the 17th, Chuikov calls for immediate reserves for the depleted 62nd Army. He asks for 2 or 3 divisions. He gets 2 brigades that evening, one of them just in time to stop a German breakthrough on the Tsaritsa. On the 18th, the defenders in Stalingrad get some brief respite from the constant air and artillery bombardment of the city, as those forces are diverted to a counterattack by Zhukov's forces from the north. The Soviet 1st Guards, 66th and 24th Armies attack towards Gumrak Gorodishche. Their attack advances 3 kilometers uphill before the German infantry, armor, and dive-bombing Stukas stop it in its tracks. At the southern limit of 62nd Army, Soviet Marines of the 92nd Brigade now hold the enormous grain elevator, where close-quarter battle rages with the Germans from the 17th, holding off 10 separate attacks on the 18th alone. At noon on the 19th, Zhukov resumes his attack southward, but his forces are again repulsed. Chuikov launches his own attack at the same time from Mamayev Kurgan towards the central railway station to cut off those German units that are advancing in the city center. They do make some progress, but not enough to relieve the pressure in the city center. By the 21st, the Germans are behind the railway station in force with armor. 62nd Army's left flank is also in danger of being turned in the south of the city, where both the German 14th and 24th Panzers are fighting. But the Marines holding the grain elevator down there are somewhat slowing the enemy advance. By now, the Soviets have lost the central landing stage on the river, and the Germans who hold it can watch and attack the traffic on the Volga to and from 62nd Army's rear. Even more serious, the Germans could be expected to push along the Volga bank, north and south of the landing stages, to slice 62nd Army away from its ferries. So on the 23rd, Chuikov launches counterattacks to try and remedy the situation. At first light that morning, the 284th Rifle Division, Siberians, crosses the river under German fire. At 10 a.m., Chuikov's counterattack kicks off, and the 95th and 284th push the Germans back towards the railway line and the station. They cannot fully clear the enemy from the river, however, or make contact with the troops on the south side of the Tsaritsa. The 13th Guards, having also received reinforcements over the river, drive the Germans from the central landing stage. Despite these minor gains for 62nd Army though, by the 25th, resistance in the southern half of the city has mostly collapsed. The Germans reach the Volga north of the Menina River Valley, cutting off a chunk of Soviet forces there, and the Soviets now hold just the area around Mamayev Kurgan, a few pockets in the center, and the factories and northern suburbs. With progress being made in the south, Paulus shifts his focus towards the northern suburbs of the city and the 3 factories south of Reynard. These huge concrete and steel structures, the tractor, barricade, and Red October factories, are fortresses, as are the huge apartment blocks of the factory workers. And the steel plant Red October, Krasny Oktябрь, has its own landing stage on the river. 11 German divisions now stand before 62nd Army, and they will strike very, very soon. Paulus is reinforcing the main shock group for the northern attack, 389th and 295th Infantry Divisions with the 24th Panzers and 100th Jaegers. The 100th Jaeger Division will attack Mamayev-Kurgan, where Chuikov is already worried by the Germans holding the southern and western slopes only 100 meters from the summit. The summit looks down over the factory district. At 6 a.m. the 27th, Chuikov launches spoiler attacks, but at 8 the Luftwaffe comes in and pins 62nd Army down, bombing its headquarters. By 10:30, they've also blown the Soviet strongpoint off the top of Mamayev-Kurgan, and elements of the 100th and 389th Infantry and 24th Panzer Divisions then attack both Mamayev-Kurgan and the Krasny Oktyabr factory. By 2 p.m., they've reached the western edge of the factory complex along a fairly long line, and by the evening, the Soviets hold only the northern and eastern slopes of Mamayev-Kurgan, and the Germans have advanced 3 kilometers. Mikhail Shumilov's attacks with the 64th Army from the south do distract the invaders, but the Germans are established now at Kuproznoye between 64th and 62nd Armies. Chuikov gets some reinforcements that night. The remainder of the 193rd Rifle Division crosses the Volga under heavy fire, and by morning are established in the cookhouses of the Oktyabr factory complex. On the 28th, German dive bombers target Krasny Oktyabr landing stage, knocking 5 of 6 steamboats working it out of action, as Chuikov has Soviet artillery focus on the summit of Mamayev-Kurgan. Neither side holds the summit anymore. It's no man's land, raked by fire from both sides. The factory complex is still holding against the attackers, though they have overrun parts of the workers' village to the west and broken through Soviet forward lines at the southeast of the Silikat factory. Despite German progress, the Soviet troops still hold out defiantly in the Silikat factory and Barakadi village. On the 29th and 30th come heavy German attacks to destroy the Orlovka salient. As the northernmost Soviet position in the city, this is where Zhukov's forces are trying to reach to relieve 62nd Army, and it's also covering the northern side of the factory district. It sticks out several kilometers into the German lines southwest of Spartanovka, is only 2 or 3 kilometers wide, and is surrounded by Germans on 3 sides. The salient has, though, been under attack for weeks and is now held by only around 250 men, the remnants of the 112th Rifle Division and 115th Rifle Brigade. On the 29th, the Germans managed to reduce the salient by half, and the attacks continue on the 30th, putting more pressure on the Oktyabr and Barakadi factory complexes as German pincers close around Orlovka. To reinforce the factory district, over the night of the 30th, the 42nd and 92nd Rifle Brigades crossed the river, relieving the 23rd Tank Corps, who were down to 17 machines and 100 men, and the 39th Guards Division, under 4,000 strong by this time, and really doing so in the nick of time. They take up position west of Oktyabr, turning the workshops into fortified strongpoints to repel the persistent attackers. No help can be sent to the Orlovka salient, though, and the German pincers close, surrounding 500 Soviet troops in what is now the Orlovka Gully. Since the attacks from the north have failed to relieve the pressure on the city, Stavka orders diversionary attacks to the south by 51st and 57th Armies starting the 29th, and by Shumilov's 64th on October 2nd to try and reach the village of Peshanka and meet up with 62nd Army. October 4th, Paulus begins his 4th and biggest series of attacks so far, now against the 3 gigantic factory fortresses Krasny Oktyabr, Barakadi, and the tractor plant. Adolf Hitler has set a deadline of October 14th for taking the city. But the first assault in mid-September was repulsed. Bigger ones on the 22nd and 27th had done a lot of damage and gained a lot of ground, but still had not won the battle. On just October 5th, German dive bombers make over 2,000 attacks on the factory area. The Germans occupy the Silikat factory, and many Soviet defenders are cut off. Stalingrad Front Commander Andrei Yeremenko orders Chuikov to counterattack the 5th to clear Barakadi and the tractor plant. But that's not possible. And because of this, the 6th is comparatively quiet. Chuikov is against the counterattack idea and wants to use any and all respite time to reinforce his units, but he eventually and reluctantly agrees to counterattack the 7th. He also moves his headquarters further up the Volga near the tractor plant, since all the German shelling has been piling up the bodies in and around the old one. The counterattack the 7th does not go off though, since 2 German divisions, backed by tanks, assault the tractor plant that day, and by the day's end, they've taken a block of the workers' apartments and moved towards the stadium. 120 men from the 500 trapped last week in the Orlovka Gully managed to break free as the Orlovka salient finally falls for good on the 7th after being bombarded for 5 days. They fall back and join the defense of the tractor plant. The fighting eases again the 9th, and Paulus prepares for his once-and-for-all final assault on the city that will be launched next week. What about Chuikov? He's by now only got like 55,000 men, 950 artillery pieces, and 500 mortars, and only around 80 tanks. The 8th Air Army has 188 planes, 101 bombers, 63 dive bombers, and 24 fighters, and that is not, in any way, going to chase off the over 1,000 planes of Luftflotte 4 that the Germans have. They also have some 90,000 men and 300 tanks and as many as 2,000 artillery pieces and mortars. So what is his defense plan? He holds a line from Rynok in the north through the factory district, the northeastern slope of Mamayev Kurgan, and a few positions around the central station. He is only a few kilometers from the Volga max in the north, and recon points to the big attack being again against the factory complexes. So he moves the 95th Rifle Division off Mamayev Kurgan slopes and between the 37th Guards and 308th Rifle Divisions defending Krasny Oktyabr. On the 11th, for the first time in 2 months, there is a complete lull in the Stalingrad sector. There was real tension in the air when Chuikov returned. He told Zholudev that according to the latest reconnaissance information, Paulus was ready to throw everything into the assault. The Germans were determined to storm Stalingrad without further delay. Their main blow would be targeted against the tractor factory. If they broke through, they would roll up our front, striking south along the Volga embankment. A very strong shock group was being created for this purpose, consisting of 5 divisions. About 30,000 fresh German troops were arriving in Stalingrad for the offensive. Chuikov told us the blow was being prepared for October 14th. At 4:20 p.m. that day, German machine gunners break into the tractor factory. At 5 p.m. a counterattack is launched from the stadium. It fails. The Germans have invaded the plant in force. By midnight, the tractor factory is surrounded on 3 sides, and over the rest of the night the advance is steadily widened, the narrow streets littered with dead bodies. The Germans fight their way through to the Volga on a 2,000-meter front, and 62nd Army is now split in 2, the right flank pinned down north of the Morkaya Machetka. Plans are made for the deployment of the 138th Division, hopefully to arrive in force late the 16th. With the dawn, the German assaults begin anew, trying to blast their way south from the tractor factory to Barricadi. But the Soviet T-34 tanks have been dug into the road and open fire at a range of 100 meters, stopping the advance and blowing up over a dozen panzers. And once the advance is stopped, Soviet artillery from the east bank and Katyusha rockets on the west one just savage the enemy. And as the Germans bring up reinforcements and the rest of Soviet 138th Division finally arrives, Chuikov issues his orders this evening. 1. The enemy has taken the Stalingrad tractor plant, is developing an attack from the STP to the south along the railway line in an attempt to seize Barricadi. 2. 62nd Army continues to hold its positions, beating off fierce enemy attacks. 3. 138th Red Banner Rifle Division from 4 a.m. 17th October to occupy and stubbornly defend the line, under no circumstances to allow enemy to approach Leninsky Prospect and Barricadi Factory. Ivan Lyudnikov's 138th Rifle Division has crossed the Volga in force, and as the week begins, they are getting into position at Barricadi, behind the factory and towards the river. Leonty Gurtiev's 308th is in the factory itself and the workers' settlement. The German attacks hit them hard, driving south from the tractor plant and along the Volga. Dive bombers and fighter bombers create a literal wall of fire sweeping towards the Soviet positions. In fact, on the 17th, the entire perimeter of Soviet 62nd Army is under fire. The initial assaults are repulsed this day, but toward Barricadi, German troops break a gap between the 138th and 308th along the railway line. They reach the northwest corner of Barricadi. By the evening of the 18th, After literally fighting meter by meter along the railway, the Germans threatened Barakadi from the west. On the 19th and 20th come more attacks on Spartanovka, Barakadi, and Krasny Oktябрь as German reinforcements reached the city. Although a wholesale German breakthrough to the Volga was still held in check, Chuikov's 62nd had taken fearful punishment between the 14th and 19th of October, and the depth of the Soviet bridgehead on the western bank in Stalingrad now reached little more than 1,000 yards. Now reinforced, strong German attacks begin the 21st against Krasny Oktябrь a bit further south by 79th Infantry supported by tanks and dive bombers. They move along the factory railway line, and by this evening some units have penetrated the northwest of the factory. The Germans had expected to be through Barakadi already the 19th though, but by the end of the week, pretty much everybody there on both sides is dug in, especially at the southwest of the factory. Both south and north of the city, the Soviets are also trying to relieve the pressure. On the 22nd, 64th Army's right flank attacks to the northwest, heading out onto the steppes. They're met by a strong counterattack, and when the Germans bring up reinforcements by night, they are pushed back to their starting points. Konstantin Rokossovsky is attacking from the north with the 24th and 66th Armies, but they too fail to make any headway. On the 26th, Vasily Sokolov's 45th Division begins crossing the Volga to take position between Krasny Oktябрь and Barakadi, to block the German advance to the Volga and the boat landings. But this day, the 62nd Army crossing, the last lifeline to the east bank, comes under heavy and sustained fire. Chuikov launches a counterattack the 27th to gain time for the whole division to cross. His attacks are successful enough to give them a day's respite from assaults, and 62nd Army holds out the rest of the week. To the south, however, Mikhail Shumilov's 64th Army is on the offensive. At 10 a.m. the 25th, his right flank starts a battle that lasts the rest of the week. They do manage to take the southern edge of Kuporoznoye, but that's really it for their efforts. In the wake of the ferocious assaults on Chuikov's defenses in Stalingrad Factory District, Paulus's army controlled more than 90% of Stalingrad and was within sight of the Volga at virtually every point along its front, but had yet to achieve the objective assigned by Hitler. The remnants of Chuikov's undermanned and undersupplied army clung stubbornly to multiple elongated bridges along the river's western bank. As November begins to unfold, the waters of the Volga River begin to freeze. Ice flows in the river will be a major problem to the river traffic supplying and reinforcing Chuikov's beleaguered 62nd Army. So Paulus is going to try one last offensive, one more big operation in the factory district. He thinks the Lazur chemical factory is his most important objective. Taking this would isolate the southern half of Chuikov's army. This time, he will include 8 pioneer battalions and their demolition equipment, and they will blast a path for the infantry to head through. On the 6th, though, Hitler's Army Group B order to 6th Army is, before resuming the attack to recapture the Lazur chemical factory, the 2 sections of the city the enemy still holds, east of the gun factory and east of the steel factory, are to be taken. Only after the bank of the Volga there is entirely in German hands will the assault on the chemical factory begin. Operation Uranus, the counteroffensive to try and encircle and destroy the Axis forces attacking Stalingrad, is set to go off November 9th. On the 8th, the spearhead attack troops man their positions and the orders are signed, but on the 9th the whole thing is postponed. This is mainly because of unit movement delays. The offensive is now planned to go off on the 19th. However, Paulus is launching the main attack of Operation Hubertus to crush 62nd Army in Stalingrad before the winter. It begins at 6:30 on the 11th with artillery and airstrikes, and then a few hours later, just before noon, the German attack wave of men and machines reaches the Volga on a 500-meter front, and 62nd Army is now split for the 3rd time. By the 13th, Krasny Oktябrь fully falls to the Germans. Ivan Lyudnikov's 138th Rifles are cut off south of Barakadi. The left and right flanks of 62nd grimly hold on. But rammed right to the river edge was now a formidable German salient, which left Lyudnikov trapped in a space 400 by 700 meters. Behind them was the river, but this was now beginning to freeze, causing problems for the Soviet river traffic bringing men and supplies into the city. During November 9th, the temperature dropped to minus 18 degrees. Another 1,000 or so men under Colonel Gorokov still hold out in the north at Rynok and Spartanovka, and 5 battered divisions in the south. One of them the 13th Guards, who with 1,500 men left are currently the strongest division of 62nd Army. But hold out they must, if the counterattack next week is to succeed. As the temperature plummets in Stalingrad, after 2 months of fighting in the city, Barricade finally falls the 14th, but the fighting grinds on for a few more days without 6th Army taking much more ground, and snow falls on the 16th. The Germans prepare for one more final assault. Chuikov's Soviet 62nd Army has only about 47,000 men total left, and 19, repeat, just 19 tanks. And those men on the west of the Volga are in 3 groups. There's Gorokov with maybe 1,000 men up in Spartanovka, Yudnikov with 400 or so men cut off next to Barricade, and the remnants of 5 divisions to the south. Gorokov, in contact with Yeremenko and Chuikov by the phone, is told to just hold on, as the kind of help you have never dreamed of was on the way. And oh boy, is it on the way. The Soviet counterattack, Operation Uranus, begins. The Soviets have over 1 million men on the Stalingrad axis, 13,541 big guns, 894 tanks, and 1,115 planes deployed as follows, according to John Erickson. Nikolai Vatutin's southwestern front has 18 rifle divisions, 3 tank corps, 2 cavalry corps, 1 tank and 1 motorized rifle brigade, and 8 artillery regiments in the 1st Guards, 5th Tank, and 21st Armies, and 17th Air Army. Konstantin Rokossovsky's Don front, the 65th, 24th, 66th Armies, and 16th Air Army has 24 rifle divisions, 1 tank corps, 6 tank brigades, and 52 mortar and artillery regiments. And of course, Andrei Yeremenko's Stalingrad front, what's left of 62nd and 64th Armies, the 57th, 51st, and 28th Army, and the 8th Air Army. They too number 24 rifle divisions, with 17 rifle or motorized rifle brigades, a cavalry corps, and 67 mortar and artillery regiments. The northern claw of the Red Army pincer attacks, 500,000 men strong, at 7:30 a.m. with the southwestern and Don front artillery beginning an 80-minute barrage, 3,500 guns and mortars on a 20-kilometer front. The infantry charge at 8:50 with their armor support and crash into the Romanian army positions. By mid-morning, the fog disperses and the Red Air Force can fly. At noon, the rout begins. 3 Romanian divisions, 13th, 14th, and 9th, began to disintegrate and fell back in confusion and panic, pursued by 47th Guards lifted on the backs of the tanks of the 8th Guards Tank Brigade, and by tank columns beginning to break out into the Don Steppe. Plans are hastily made for German and Romanian armor to counterattack, but with the radio trucks of the 1st Romanian Armored Division knocked out, the 22nd Panzers lose touch with them, orders are not coordinated, and the Romanian armor drives to its doom as dawn arrives the 20th, accidentally running right into a mass of Soviet armor. The German armor has pulled back, and the Romanian 3rd Army is broken into pieces. Within 24 hours, 65,000 Romanians are taken prisoner. On the morning of the 20th, the southern claw of the pincer attacks. They attack the Romanian 4th Army and the elements of the German 4th Panzer Army that are not actually within Stalingrad. Fog delays the beginning of Yeremenko's attack, but at 10 a.m. the artillery barrage begins, and 45 minutes later, the armor and infantry move off from south of Beketovka and the Lake District. By day and night they press on, and by the 20th they have orders to reach Afganarovo Station. They reach it the morning of the 21st, and a whole 35 kilometers wide from there to Tundutovo has been ripped in the flanks of the German 4th Panzer Army. The Stalingrad front forces continue on to rip a hole in the flanks of the German 4th Panzer Army, threatening its headquarters, which moved to Buzinovka. By now, both the Soviet southwestern and Stalingrad fronts are over 30 kilometers into the German rear, and there are big holes in the long extended flank of 6th Army. The 26th Tank Corps has taken Perelazovsky and is heading for the River Don. Units from the 5th Tank and 21st Army have surrounded several Romanian divisions. By the end of the 21st, elements of the southwestern front are 100 kilometers into the German rear and driving for Kalach, Mobile units from the Stalingrad front have made 50 kilometers on the line to Zeti. The Soviets have broken through the Romanian Third Army on an 80-kilometer front. Rokossovsky's Don front tanks are advancing on Kalach. Early the 22nd, Sovietsky is cleared of Germans. That night, 26th Tank Corps begins trying to force the Don. German command has now been forced to move from Golubinskaya to Nizhny Chir, though Friedrich Paulus will fly into Stalingrad on Hitler's personal orders. On the 23rd at 2 p.m., the southwestern and Stalingrad fronts link up. The Soviets take the bridge across the Don before it can be blown. Stalingrad is now surrounded. In an area like 55 kilometers east to west, and like 30 north to south, are the headquarters of 4 Axis infantry and 1 Panzer Corps, no fewer than 14 German infantry divisions, 3 German Panzer and 3 motorized divisions, loads of scattered Romanians, a Croat regiment, supply units, artillery units, engineers, totaling well over 250,000 men, and likely over 300,000, 100 tanks, 10,000 trucks, and 2,000 big guns. In response, German Army Chief of Staff Kurt Zeitzler and Army Group B Chief of Staff Georg von Schoenstern have been sorting out a breakout operation. Hitler radios Paulus telling him to stay put and that he will be resupplied and relieved. That day, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein arrives from Leningrad to take command of a new Don Front Army Group. Problem is, the forces allocated to him to create this Army Group Don either don't exist, are trapped in Stalingrad, or are keeping open the link to Army Group A in the Caucasus. Manstein doesn't really know how to go about things. A breakout from Stalingrad may not be possible, and if possible, still may not be desirable. I mean, what if they do send in force and help their troops break out? The Soviets would have no need to continue to fortify the city, and all the force that's been used for that could then help with more huge encirclements. And 6th Army and the relief force would then be concentrated at the tip of a long exposed salient once again. Army Group A might even be in danger from the northeast then. Well, by the 26th, there is a bit of a lull as the Soviets begin to focus on the pocket and the Axis build up for a counterattack. The outer Stalingrad encirclement ring, by that day, is well over 300 kilometers long, from Kuprosnoye to Sovietsky, then to the northeast of Kalach and Bolshenabatovsky, to Golubaya, south of Samofilovka and Yazovka. And the 27th, Stavka orders the coordination of the Don and Stalingrad fronts and their future attempts to destroy 6th German Army under Vasilevsky. On November 28th, the southwestern Don and Stalingrad fronts renew their attacks. They are not as successful as the initial attacks were. German 17th Army actually counterattacks the 28th against Nikolai Vatutin's southwestern front's right wing, but they are thrown back. The Soviets there go on the defensive afterwards. Prokofy Romanenko's 5th Tank Army is being frustrated by both German and Romanian defenders along the Chir and Don rivers, and still cannot take Surovikino or Rishkovsky. Over the next couple of days, the fighting along 5th Tank Army's front is inconclusive, though on the 30th, the Soviets have created a bridgehead on the Chir, which could be used to frustrate German attempts to relieve Stalingrad. As for the Don front, they're pushing east from near Kalach as the German 6th Army withdraws into the Stalingrad pocket. German resistance there is proving stubborn and showing the Soviets that even the 9 armies they have in the region might not be enough to simultaneously carry on their westward offensive and destroy the Axis forces trapped in the city. Much of the Stalingrad front is actually doing side operations against 6th Armies south and east, but the 51st Army is heading south towards Kotelnikovo. They cannot take the town before 6th Panzer Division arrives though, and so they go over to the defensive. By this time, Manstein's Army Group Don has assigned Army Group Hoth, what's left of the 4th Panzer Army, plus what's left of 2 Romanian Army Corps, combined into a new Romanian 4th Army, a double job. The Romanians are to delay the Soviet advance on Kotelnikovo long enough for Hoth to put together a strike force to reinforce or rescue 6th Army. Nikolai Vatutin's Soviet Southwestern Front has been gearing up for more big attacks on the River Chir since the 28th, although Romanenko's 5th Tank Army has kept up the pressure on Rishkovsky. The plan for Vatutin's forces is to break through the enemy just southwest of Ostrovsky, then head south and then southeast towards Nizhny Chirskaya. When things kick off the 7th, there are gains, but there are heavy casualties. Romanenko, however, insists that 1st Tank Corps achieve its goals, no matter the cost. In other words, destroying the enemy's Nizhny-Chirskaya grouping by the end of the 8th. However, the Germans counterattack early that morning, and within a few hours wreck about a third of that tank force, 53 tanks, losing just 10 of their own. With the Soviets convinced that this was the area from which the Germans would launch an attack to try and relieve Stalingrad, Stavka then orders a 5th Shock Army to be created to reinforce 5th Tank Army and beat the 48th Panzer Corps and prevent such a relief operation. Yeremenko's Stalingrad front is to form this shock army by the 12th, so in just 4 days. While this shock army is forming though, 5th Tank Army is still attacking on the Chir. On the 9th and 10th, the attacks in general fail or are inconclusive. And near the end of the day, the 10th, Stavka intelligence reports German reinforcements en route. So on the 11th, most of 5th Tank Army goes on the defensive, with limited attacks ordered near Surovikino and Ostrovsky just to tie down and wear down the 11th Panzer and 336th Infantry Divisions. They do manage to expand the bridgehead west of Surovikino and make 2 separate small breakthroughs on the river, but above all, they continue diverting the attention of the 48th Panzer Corps. Around the Stalingrad pocket, front commanders Rokossovsky and Yeremenko had been ordered to keep up at least some sort of offensive operations while they await the arrival of Rodion Malinovsky's 2nd Guards Army to bolster their forces. Yeremenko's Stalingrad front has been launching mainly local attacks. By December 5th, Rokossovsky realizes that without the 2nd Guards Army, or someone's help, further attacks are useless. Chief of Staff Alexander Vasilevsky agrees in general, but attacks continue by all the Don and Stalingrad front armies the 8th to 10th to soften up the enemy where they plan to have Malinovsky attack. The Red Army did come close to undoing 6th Army's defenses during these attacks though. While most were failures, 21st Army's attack on the western flank on the 8th cut a 2-kilometer wide and 6-kilometer deep hole in the German defenses by nightfall, capturing several high points, and it took until the 11th for 14th Panzer Corps to clear them from their rear in a close-run battle. Had the 14th Panzers failed to do so, Paulus's position may have collapsed. Time is not on 6th Army's side though. On the 10th, Paulus sends a message to Army Group Don that the heavy fighting and the lack of rations is really beginning to affect morale and his army's defensive capability. The recent Axis defeats all over the region, the demolition of the Romanian 3rd Army and the encirclement of the German 6th Army by Operation Uranus, the Red Army outer ring fronts on the Chir and the Achsein leave German High Command and Erich von Manstein's Army Group Don with only one option to prevent their entire front from collapsing: launch a sudden and immediate thrust to reach 6th Army from the southwest. So on December 12th, Operation Wintergewitter, Winter Storm, begins. Manstein begins his offensive from Kotelnikovo. Hermann Hoth is in tactical charge of 13 divisions for this offensive, attacking the Soviet 51st Army. Well, the German 6th and 23rd Panzer divisions from 52nd Panzer Corps, with what's left of the Romanian 6th and 7th Corps, hit 51st Army pretty hard and reached the southern approaches to the Mishkova River the morning of the 14th. Wintergewitter also further messes with the plans for 2nd Shock Army. Late on the 14th, as 2nd Shock Army is preparing to finally attack the Stalingrad pocket the following morning, Stavka orders them down to shore up 51st Army, and again it will take a few days for them to get there and get in position. There has been a relative lull in the fighting around the pocket for a few days in anticipation of 2nd Shock's offensive. While this is going on though, on the 13th, Markian Popov's new 5th Shock Army begins its offensive as planned, surprising the enemy, and they and Romanenko's 5th Tank Army hit hard at Rychovsky and the confluence of the Chir and the Don. Rychovsky finally falls that day, and the Ostrovsky bridgehead is also now 18 kilometers wide and several kilometers deep. Popov orders his forces that night to take Verkhne Chirsky, which they do by the 15th, and 5th Tank Army takes Surovikino. And on the 16th, the Soviets begin Operation Little Saturn, the follow-up to Operation Uranus, which was also, until a week before, supposed to be spearheaded by 2nd Shock Army. They hit the Italian 8th Army on the Don. There are also huge attacks on Army Group Hullet on the Cheer, so Manstein's west flank is suddenly in real trouble. The Little Saturn attacks are by the Southwestern Front's 1st and 3rd Guards armies, together with 6th Army from the Voronezh front. While this operation develops, 5th Tank and 5th Shock Army's operations on the Cheer and the Don become a Tormosen offensive on Little Saturn's eastern flank. By the 17th, Little Saturn turns into a rout of the Axis forces in its path. Thing is, Hoth is still advancing, and his forward tanks have reached the Aksai River. The 6th Panzer Division is 56 kilometers from Stalingrad, but on the flanks the Italian 8th Army is collapsing. Inside Stalingrad though, Paulus seems not to be making any effort to break out, so on the 18th, Manstein sends his intelligence officer into the Stalingrad pocket to coordinate with Paulus. Both Paulus and his chief of staff tell him that 6 Army's lack of ammunition, mobile forces, and heavy weapons mean that any breakout attempt would be disastrous. They want more ammunition airlifted in to help them hold out until help can reach them. By the 19th, the 3 attacking armies of Little Saturn, 320,000 men and 1,000 tanks strong, have collapsed Army Group Hullet's defenses and shattered the Italian 8th Army. It has basically ceased to exist as a fighting formation. Because of this, Erich von Manstein orders Paulus to try to break out now. Paulus again refuses. On the 20th, Manstein tries to get Army Chief of Staff Kurt Zeitzler to arrange for Paulus to break out, but that doesn't happen. On the 21st, Manstein appeals to Hitler to order Paulus to break out, but Hitler quotes Paulus about fuel shortages and says no. So on the evening of the 22nd, Manstein tells OKH that the relief of 6th Army has to wait until they can stop Little Saturn. By now, Hoth's drive towards Stalingrad is losing momentum anyway. The 23rd, he stopped on the Mishkova River, and the 24th, he is driven back. And by the end of the 23rd, attacking south from the Don and west from the Cheer, Little Saturn has surrounded, captured, or destroyed most of the Italian 8th Army and forced Group Hullet to retreat south. They have cut a gap 180 kilometers wide between Army Group B and Army Group Don. That day on the 24th, Soviet 24th and 25th Tank Corps from the Southwestern Front attack Manstein's Army Group Don's airfields, which are absolutely vital to supply 6th Army. By the 24th, the mobile groups of Little Saturn have done what no one on either side thought really possible. They have broken around 200 kilometers into Army Group B's rear. They've sabotaged German air bases to the point that exactly 0 supplies are flown into the Germans in Stalingrad on Christmas Eve. Manstein was now in no doubt that the Axis forces in the region could not both restore a cohesive front line in the face of Little Saturn and drive for Stalingrad to relieve 6th Army at the same time. For his part, he chose to defend Army Group Don's airfields rather than attempt to continue his advance. The Soviets are preparing for a drive on Tormosen. 5th Tank goes into action the 27th, and 5th Shock and 2nd Guards armies join in the 29th, attacking to the west across the Don and the Cheer. Together, they're trying a massive pincer movement. 5th Tank kicks off its offensive and makes great initial progress, and German Army Group Hullet falls back, but the new defensive line stymies the attackers by the end of the 28th. But with 5th Tank once again making no progress, its commander Prokofy Romanenko is out. That evening, Joseph Stalin relieves him of his command, and Markian Popov is in. Vyacheslav Tsvetayev replaces Popov in command of the 5th Shock Army. That army and 2nd Guards then get their offensives going, and by the end of the day, the 29th, both have solid bridgeheads on the western bank of the Don. On the 29th, Andrei Yeremenko's Stalingrad front is renamed the Southern Front. The 57th, 62nd, and 64th armies are transferred to Konstantin Rokossovsky's Don Front, so all the armies encircling the enemy at Stalingrad are under his command, and all the forces aiming at Kotelnikovo are under Yeremenko's Southern Front. Speaking of Kotelnikovo, on the 26th, Erich von Manstein's failed relief offensive is in full retreat south of the Don. The Soviet 2nd Guards and 51st Armies are near Kotelnikovo. By the 27th, they have encircled it from the north and south, and the 57th Panzer Corps is in trouble. They cannot hold out, and the Soviets take Kotelnikovo the 29th. On the 31st, 5th Shock Army drives southwest from Nizhnecherskaya and pushes the enemy out of Tormosin. And by January 1st, north of the Caucasus, the Soviet Little Saturn attacks have, in 2 weeks of fighting, cut a salient 250 kilometers wide by 130 deep into the Axis lines between Army Groups B and Don. The 6th Guards Rifle Corps and 18th Tank Corps are launching attack after attack against Milerovo. The week is comparatively quiet around Stalingrad as the Soviets are preparing for Operation Ring. But there is some fighting in the city itself, since Alexander Vasilevsky and Stalingrad front have ordered Vasily Chuikov's 62nd Army to go on the offensive and expand his bridgehead in the city's factory district. So he makes attacks in Spartanovka and near the Mamayev Kurgan. Though this might seem quiet compared to October or November in the city, overall, reports of both sides during the second half of December agree that the fighting in Stalingrad city was just as brutal and deadly as it had been throughout the fall. But by this time, the Germans were the besieged. The Soviets soon offer surrender terms to 6th Army, but this is rejected by Paulus. Paulus asked Hitler for freedom of action, but it was refused, as the continued resistance by 6th Army is tying down 7 Soviet armies. Also, starting December 19th though, were Soviet plans to liquidate the Stalingrad pocket, Operation Ring. Stavka got Nikolai Voronov to coordinate attack plans for the coming year, so now. It is no coincidence that Voronov is the Red Army's senior artillery officer. This time around, they plan to rely on crushing artillery. Their goal is to break right through the defense and head due east to eventually reach Krasny Oktyabr village at the western edge of the Stalingrad factory district. There are to be supporting attacks from 66th Army from northwest of Orlovka and the 57th and 64th Armies towards Voroponovo. All the Red Army victories of November and December have them ready for more, and what Stalin wants is to not only defeat all of Army Group B and Army Group Don, but to also destroy Army Group A before it can vacate the Caucasus. And in fact, we're looking at offensives to go off from the Gulf of Finland to the Black Sea. The first stage is a series of directives issued early this week. The southwestern, southern, and Transcaucasian fronts will launch Operation Dawn, aiming towards Rostov, and to defeat Group Holod north of the Don River and the 4th Panzer Army south of it. They would close the door on Army Group A's escape. There is also a Ostrogozhd-Rossosh offensive against the Hungarian 2nd Army and the Italian Alpine Corps in the works, and then an offensive against the German 2nd Army further north near Voronezh. Operation Ring, to crush the Stalingrad pocket, goes off the 10th. According to John Keegan, the 7,000-gun artillery barrage that day is the largest concentration of artillery in history. By the end of the day, the Soviets have broken the western defenses on a 15-kilometer front and are making for the Roshoshka River. They're also advancing from the south. After several days of very bloody fighting, by the 14th, there are signs that German 6th Army is beginning to disintegrate, and Soviet commander Konstantin Rokossovsky has a new general offensive there that is launched that day. On the 16th and 17th, the Soviets grind forward, though much slower on the 17th. The 65th, 21st, and 57th Armies have advanced 22 kilometers in 5 days. The 24th and 64th, 10 kilometers. They've taken Malaya and Pitomnik, both the town and the vital airfield. At the northeast of the pocket, 66th and 62nd Armies are hitting Karl Strecker's 11th Corps, and in the city, Walter von Seydlitz's 51st Corps, preventing them from reinforcing the troops trying to hold the west. Also, by the end of the day, the 17th, a new Soviet 62nd Army offensive, ordered by Vasily Chuikov, has made a big increase to their bridgehead on the Volga. Even though German forces were bedraggled, worn out, and half-starved, they now occupied stronger defensive positions along the Orlovka, Gonchara, Peshanyi, and Starodubovka line, and gave no indication of ending their determined and often fanatical defense. Therefore, at Stavka's direction, Voronov and Rokossovsky worked out a new plan for the final reduction of the Stalingrad pocket. So, there is a lull in the fighting for a couple of days. But on the 21st, the final attack begins, with 24th, 65th, and 21st Armies making reconnaissance in force attacks. 24th and 65th just continue those attacks on the 22nd to prevent the enemy from establishing new defenses or diverting force. This is after a 70-minute artillery barrage. They do advance during the day from between 3 and 10 kilometers in various sectors of the front, and 21st Army reaches a point 2 kilometers west of Gumrak. But the week ends, and the enemy still fights and still holds. The next 2 days see very bloody fighting around Gumrak, as 6th Army tries to retake the approaches to it and screen its forces that are withdrawing into Stalingrad city proper. Paulus dispatched the 24th makes special mention of how effectively the Romanian 1st Cavalry and 20th Infantry fight this day. Gumrak and Opyatnaya Station fall the 24th to 21st Army, and 66th Army pushes south west of Orlovka. From the south, 57th and 64th Armies reach the center of Kuporosnoye. In the factory district in Stalingrad city, 62nd Army gains very little that day, so Vasily Chuikov orders it to go on the defensive and just wait for the other armies to break into the city. On the 25th, the Axis defenses outside the city have been basically destroyed. That day, Rokossovsky finishes his plans to wipe out the enemy in the city. He will chop them into 2 halves and liquidate them separately. 21st and 65th Armies will attack from due west, while 62nd attacks from the east. These forces are to link up in Krasny Oktyabr village. After this, 65th, 66th, and 62nd will destroy the northern pocket, and 21st, 57th, and 64th the southern. There will be no artillery barrage to increase the size of the attack. The attacks go off the morning of the 26th, and already by 10 a.m., aerial observers can see a smaller southern and a larger northern pocket formed in the city's defenders. By the evening, the northern pocket is in Barakadi, the tractor plant, and parts of their villages. To the south, the Soviets have taken the Zaritsa River and its bridge, but the Axis hold out on its northern shore. Paulus moves his headquarters to Univermag department store. On the 27th, 6th Army holds its positions against all comers, artillery included, but the food supply has now been completely used up, though airdrops are attempted. The northern pocket is now under control of Karl Strecker, while Paulus himself directs operations in the south. The 28th, the Soviet Don Front's armies make progress once again. In the south, they make a bridgehead across the Zaritsa. In the north, they cross the Moraya Machetka and Machetka rivers and establish themselves in the northwest corner of the tractor factory and the western edge of Barakadi. Disintegration is no longer imminent by the afternoon of the 29th. It is a fact, as the Soviets break through north of the Zaritsa and west of the railroad. 6th Army radios out that collapse of the southern pocket tomorrow is likely. Ammunition and anti-equipment for resistance do not equipped. The Soviets are determined to capture Friedrich Paulus. Most Red Army officers suspect that Paulus is still somewhere inside the southern cauldron, but where exactly is anyone's guess, and by now there's real competition among the troops. Throughout the evening hours of the 30th, Mikhail Shumilov's 64th Army systematically reconquers the city center. Then the 29th Division finally gets reliable intel from German prisoners close to the Univermag. As a sign of proof for his superiors, a Soviet negotiator brings back a German pistol, a swastika flag, and a name: Paulus. Throughout the night, the fighting continues as the Soviets surround the department store. Then, in the early morning hours of the 31st, a German general steps out of the entrance signaling surrender. At 6 a.m., the first Soviet officers begin approaching Univermag, but the Germans refuse to let anyone in that is not of high rank. Only high officers with the authority to negotiate will be allowed. At 7:30, this news reaches Shumilov, who orders a ceasefire between 8 and 10 a.m. At 9 a.m., the Chief of Staff of 64th Army, General Ivan Laskin, arrives with translators. Shortly after that, he is joined by Lieutenant Colonel Leonid Vinokur of the Commissariat. As they are led down into the cellar, they are greeted by the remaining staff of the 6th Army. There they are taken to Paulus, who, tired, haunted, and disheveled, is taken into custody. Strecker's northern pocket holds out, but on the 1st, the Don Front rains hell from the skies down on it with artillery and aerial attacks, which prompts the defenders to raise white flags all over their positions. By 9:30 p.m., the Soviets have broken through at the tractor plant. Soon it is all over. The Soviets have won the Battle of Stalingrad. It took them around 1.1 million casualties to do so. The defeated Axis suffered around 850,000 casualties. This is nearly 2 million men in total. The world sees the mighty Six Armies surrender. That is a major event in this war, and this is something new, a German army surrendering. But the conflict is far from over. The Soviet Union is on the offensive in December, January, and February, but the Axis have counteroffensives planned, and to see what happens, if you have not already, go and watch the regular weekly episodes. For this map special, this map super special of the Battle of Stalingrad is now at its conclusion. Now, remember, we made this video in partnership with Call of War. Again, that's a free online strategy game where you can engage other players in modern global warfare. You can choose your own strategy and engage in epic battles. You can even take over the whole world if that's your kind of thing. So click the link in the description and get an exclusive gift of 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. That offer only lasts for 30 days, so be quick. Click the link, choose your country, and fight your way to victory. See you next time.